Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here, and it is wartime here on SPTV. I'm joined this evening by Natalie from the channel Scientology, Life After a Cult. Look at you getting close to 8,000 subs over there.
I know. So everybody get over there, subscribe, because my big motivation for getting to 10,000 is to have my Tony join me on a live stream.
Yeah, he said 10,000 subs and then he'll come on with you.
He was like, I'm not getting out of bed for less than 10,000 subs. I'm like, listen to you, diva, but that's why I love him. He knows how to motivate me. He knows I like a good challenge, but you got to make it fun. It can't feel like work.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yes, wartime, Scientology against the internet. The title of this video is "Will Social Media Bring the Downfall of Scientology?" Well, what's your observation on this topic?
Well, I think the easy thing to say would be, well, yes, probably. But if you look at this on a deeper level, on the difference between what's happening now with not just the internet, but I mean, to go back a little bit in history, remember, Aaron, when there was the ex-Scientology message boards?
I
don't know if
wasn't
you
a
ever
part
got
of
into
those
that.
things. I've heard of them. Anyway,
They were
I mean,
these-
I've heard of them. I've read about them, and I remember reading about them and being struck by what a big deal those message boards were to the Scientology authorities. Like they were targeted for destruction.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, how small those boards were, and yet Scientology declared war on these boards, even though it was maybe a few dozen people, maybe 100 at most.
Yeah. Yep.
In
You're
like
totally
secret
right.
groups, it wasn't even like something you could like that was being broadcast to the world.
Yep. You know, you had a username. So back in the day, before YouTube and before social media, well, there was social media, but there were these ex-Scientology message boards, and people would go on there and share their stories and connect with people who used to be in the Sea organization. And it's kind of where a lot of us gathered and connected. And when I was executing my 2-year plan to leave Scientology with my family, part of what I was doing was I was on there. But because my husband at the time didn't know that I wanted to leave Scientology because I wasn't ready to yet tell him, he was almost the last person to find out. I used to go down into my basement with my computer, open it up, make sure no one was looking, and I get on the ex-Scientology message board, get all the info, found out the truth about the history of L. Ron Hubbard, the truth about the history of the Sea Org, about the abuses, so many things. And then I would clear my history and go upstairs. You'd think I was down there, you know, elbow deep in porn. I just felt like I totally had to hide it because in Scientology, there's snitch culture, and he could have just reported me before I was ready or before my family was ready.
So, like, what year, more or less, would this have been?
2008, between 2008 and 2010, around there. I mean, I think it was around longer. Well, it was around longer than that. And prior to that, there was, what was it called? Operation Clambake. And so there's been these evolutions on social media of people in the ex-Scientology community sharing and coming out with these things and sharing their stories. And once in a while, you'd get one, you know, their story about Scientology that would make it into the media. But today, we live in this magical world where everybody can have a platform and just in an instant reach so many people and share these things. Because Aaron, back then, there was pretty much just ex-Scientologists in there. There wasn't a lot of, you know, why would you go in there? And there were admins and mods, and it wasn't the same. You know, what we were missing, what I think the secret sauce we have been missing since the first people tried to shut down L. Ron Hubbard back in the day, the secret sauce we have been missing is the support of those never in Scientology. That's what I think the big difference is.
I think that's a really, really good point. That's a really good point.
Because it's not just us, Aaron.
Right. And in order to even get that support, people have to be on platforms where that support is even exists or is available. And you might
Exactly.
have a couple hundred former Scientologists whose stories are only being told on like one platform or one blog, but those blogs have limited reach, and your average,
Mhm.
the audience of those blogs is going to be limited. You then have an unlimited platform like YouTube, relatively unlimited, and TikTok and Twitter and all these things, and all of a sudden there's the reach possible in order to even get that kind of support.
Yeah. Definitely. And the interaction too, the ability to
Yeah.
ask questions and go back and forth and understand. And I've said this before, and I'll probably keep saying it, the level of compassion and empathy that I've been shown, that you've been shown, that many of us have been shown, has been such an eye opener. I think it's created this safe space for people, not just who are under the radar in Scientology or who've left Scientology, but even for people who've struggled with their own cult, right? Whether it's a controlling relationship or a high control group, it's this community of people that are coming together and bonding over this desire to shut that stuff down. For us, it's Scientology. But I don't know about
Right.
you, Aaron, but once Scientology is shut down, I'm just going to move on to the next cult, not as a member, because I've learned my lesson, but just shut it down and continue to educate and get these messages out because they apply.
Exactly. Yeah, the world is never going to run out of cults, and even people who have not been in cults have been in situations where their experience, what they've gone through, that if they hear stories from people who have been in cults, there's something that resonates with them, whether that cult is an abusive relationship, or you know what I mean, like the high control group. The high control group experience. You
Yeah.
don't actually have to be in a high control group to resonate with the stories of people who have been in those groups. And something just occurred to me while you were talking, which is this will seem like a digression, but it's not. I want to talk about South Park for a hot second.
Sure.
Okay, so many people were introduced to Scientology through South Park.
Yeah.
So many people. And when I say introduced to Scientology, you know what I mean. The conversation, the discussion, being introduced to the silliness and what they actually believe. But what is South Park? It is entertainment and it is comedy. It was a platform that had massive reach due to other reasons, but then was able to deliver a message about Scientology that reached millions and millions and millions of people. I'm only mentioning that because I think there is value to being entertaining and funny and fun to watch so that people want to watch you, so that when you say other things, there's ears listening and eyeballs watching.
Yeah.
And so
I
sometimes
completely
the longer
agree.
I have my channel, the sillier I get, the little more, outlandish, the more of my basic personality, shines through as far as just being sort of silly and funny. Where in the earlier videos of my channel, I was not trying to do those things. And I'm only mentioning this, and I apologize if it seems like a digression, but it's like, I'm intending to be entertaining. I'm not just intending to lecture or teach or, do some public service. Everyone should thank me for my service. Like, I'm trying to be funny and entertaining. And I guess there's a certain aspect that I hope people realize that is what is allowing me to have the reach that I have, is that people want to have fun. And South Park is fun. So when South Park gets a big audience because they're funny and they're entertaining, and then they do something about Scientology, all of a sudden, South Park was kind of a tipping point in the public awareness about Scientology. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be too long-winded about it, but I feel like there is a lesson to be learned from that. That's all.
There completely is. And I think we're seeing it play out again with the different platforms, with TikToks and other platforms as well. And you're totally right. Getting that message delivered in a way that, because I mean, let's be honest, it's the so many things about Scientology, and both of us grew up in Scientology and both of us were in the Sea organization. There's so much about that so many things that are traumatic and are heavy and sometimes very difficult to talk about. And for me, it brings this kind of counterbalance to be even allowed to find something funny or make fun of in Scientology, because as we both know, you're not allowed to joke about Scientology. That was, next to talking about Scientology, because I always say that's the first rule in Scientology is don't talk about Scientology. All you can do is tell people to read a book. But
That's
after
right.
that, it's making fun of it. You're just like, was such a cardinal sin of making fun of Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard or, oh, Lord forbid, David Miscavige.
Early on in my videos, I was very nervous, hesitant to talk about Scientology or make fun of Scientology in a way that would be offensive to people who were still in Scientology. And that was because I wanted people who were in Scientology who accidentally stumbled upon my videos to be able to connect with my content. I still feel that way. It's just that more and more I feel that what I'm trying to do is to reach a larger audience outside of Scientology. And so I've become less and less concerned about whether my content might be offensive to current Scientologists. One of the things that has allowed me to be less concerned about that is how many under the radar Scientologists contact me and say how much they love the content, even the funny stuff, even the silly stuff, even the ridiculing stuff, making fun of Dave, making fun of the OT3 story, all this stuff. A lot of Scientologists who are under the radar love that stuff. And that has allowed me to try to be less proper in my videos. And I imagine you could, somebody could criticize me for that. But I just wanted to kind of comment on why my style has changed a little bit over the last year and a half. I don't know. It also allows me to enjoy what I do more. If I can just sort of be myself and laugh about it the way I want to laugh about it without being like, oh my God, would a Scientologist be upset by this? It's like, who cares at some point? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm the new kid on the block as far as SPTV goes. But one thing I know just from making it into my 50s is anything that you do, the most successful and best way to do it is to just be yourself as much as you can, because there's a time and place. If I fully was myself all the time, that might not work. But you know what I'm saying? It's people either connect to you or you don't, or when you meet people, you connect to them or you don't. I once had I knew this woman who was a manners expert. She was an etiquette expert, and she taught etiquette to both in the corporate world, to children, to adults. And I asked her, I said, and this was after I left Scientology. So I was getting to know more people outside of Scientology, pretty much everybody, because Scientologists were not allowed to speak to me once I left Scientology and then was declared a suppressive person. And I was concerned with did I really know enough about etiquette? I hadn't, you live in the world, because by then I was out of the Sea organization, but I was an everyday parishioner. So it's not like I didn't know people outside of Scientology. I did, but it was still very limited. And I realized that I had some habits from my time. And some of these habits weren't just because of Scientology. Other people I think might relate to this. One of them was I swore like a sailor.
Yep.
Where it was just the way that I would speak sometimes. And I didn't realize how shocking that could be to people until my children were old enough to tell me.
Yes. One of my first jobs out of the Sea Org, my second job out of the Sea Org was consulting for the physical therapy company that had clinics in Spartanburg and Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm going up and I'm doing these little what do they call them? In trainings, in sessions, what do they call them? In services, these little in services. And I'm up there on, sketching some stuff out, and I'm just dropping F-bombs left and right. I have no idea where I am. I just assume everyone loves the casual F-bombs sprinkled into some corporate training seminars. Oh my God. I had to get a talking to after that.
What did they say to you, and how did you handle that?
The guys who own the company, who hired me, who, by the way, were not Scientologists, they had enough experience just working with me personally one-on-one that they knew my personality, and they knew I didn't know. They knew I grew up in a cult.
Yeah. Did they know,
Yeah.
were they familiar at all with Scientology?
So they were familiar with Scientology because they had been clients of one of these wise business consulting groups. That's actually how they met me. I was their
Oh.
consultant, and then they hired me away from that company to work just for them. So I mean, I'll give you an example. So like they knew that I'd never gone to school, high school, much less college.
Yeah.
And we were all out this big company dinner, and all their spouses were there, and some of the key executives were there. And one of them was like, "So where did you go to school? So Aaron, where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to college?" I said, "Oh, I never went to college." And everyone was like, "Oh." And then someone goes to the owner and they go, "Did you know that?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, I didn't know he was going to say that, but yeah, I knew that." And so I just never had a whole lot of insecurity about my background or my story. But yeah, no, I had to be told to stop using the F-bombs in the Bible Belt at work.
Yeah. Definitely. Or having the another thing I talked to this etiquette expert about is I said, sometimes I share things and I don't think it's that big a deal, but other people react in a way that makes me think it's a bigger deal than I think it is. And this is before I realized I don't know about you, Aaron, and I actually would love to hear your answer to this. When I left Scientology, I still didn't fully really get that it was a cult. I
Oh, I
feel like
definitely
I
didn't think it
kind of
was a
knew.
cult.
Yeah, but it took a while for me to identify so much of what happened as being weird. I didn't, in
Yeah.
my family dynamic, I didn't know that my mom marrying my grandpa was like, I mean, I thought it was odd, but because, it was handled in a very Scientology fashion, things just really weren't said about it. And, we just kind of all move on from it. And he was kind of the cult leader of our family. And we just went along with the whole grandpa dad thing for some time because you don't say anything. So for me, those things like that should have been like, ooh, that's weird. I feel like the next 10 years of my life when I left Scientology, and now it's been 13 years. Now I feel like I kind of understand more. So I know that sharing certain stories about my past might not be the best icebreaker, even though I think, because in Scientology, right, they push our buttons until we don't have any, and we're encouraged to overshare. But when you're oversharing things that you don't realize were actually abusive, then people kind of like, whoa, 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 what?
Yeah. I guess I don't think I'm an oversharer. Um, but I don't know, maybe oversharers wouldn't know that they're oversharers. What's an example of something you would other than grandpa dad or whatever?
Other
What
than
is
grandpa
there another
dad,
example
yeah.
of something that would
Oh
be an
my goodness.
example?
I feel like there was tons, even when I would talk about how, like even how my mom got into Scientology, how my mom was working as an exotic dancer and met him in there. And he was a wood carving artist who happened to be a paraplegic. It just these whole, I didn't recognize
You,
until enough people were close to me to, after a bit of time, who got to know me, friends outside of Scientology. And I feel like they almost did an intervention where it was mostly helping me see that, it's good that you can talk about these things so openly, but do you really understand how wrong so much of what happened and you experienced was? And Aaron, I didn't. Even
you
now,
you have the best
I
stories.
realize things. Yeah, like
You
out
have
of
the
the
best
blue.
stories. So I realized even if I don't describe myself as an oversharer, I am an inappropriate, vulgar joke teller in ways that I think are gonna be hilarious, and everyone else, it's like a dead cat at a funeral or a dead cat at a wedding. Oh, wait, dead cat at a funeral? What's the saying? How does that saying
I
go,
think it's
guys? Let me know
dead
in the
cat.
live chat.
Either
Dead
one, it
cat in the
doesn't
punch
work.
bowl? I don't remember what it was. I have a friend, former Scientologist friend, staff member from Australia, and he lives here in Clearwater. And his favorite icebreaker when meeting new people is asking them if they have ever wondered what human flesh tastes like. That is his favorite icebreaker. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to set the tone for the evening. And one of our Scientologist mutual friends, who's a little more active in the business community, had to pull him aside at one of his get-togethers and be like, beforehand, and be like, can we pump the brakes this evening on the human flesh stuff? So I guess that's telling someone else's story, but my God, it was funny.
It's the things
no,
that you would think that you would know.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, a turd. Someone's saying turd in a punch bowl, but there's definitely
Yeah.
a dead cat thing. Oh, dead cat at a party. Okay. Yes. I like the dead cat in the punch bowl personally. You know what they say, you can lead a gift horse to water, but don't shoot him in the mouth. So it took a long time for me to actually think of Scientology as a cult, because like, you always think of a cult as being something that's other than what you're in. Like, no one thinks they're in a cult. It's what's crazy is watching the NXIVM documentaries. Look, as former cult members, us being former Scientologists, I'm watching these NXIVM documentaries and I'm thinking to myself, how could anyone fall for this shit? But I guarantee you those NXIVM people are watching the Scientology stories going, how could anyone fall for this shit?
Oh, yeah.
And so, no, I mean, it's just, no, I did not. It's funny, when I first started mentally leaving Scientology, I wasn't even thinking there was anything wrong with Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard. I was still focused on David Miscavige and the abuse. And I was talking to actually our mutual friend, Jeff Pearlman. I was talking to him for the first time in years and years and years. He had already been declared and was out of Scientology. And he said something about L. Ron Hubbard being a con man. And in my mind, I remember thinking, oh, I didn't even think that was on the table. That's a whole chapter. I hadn't even I didn't realize that was the door that could be opened. Oh, okay. Like, my mind hadn't even gone there.
Yeah, it happens. It happens in layers. It comes off in layers. And I think this is why, like I'm saying, the big change or the turning point here is the people who've never been in Scientology picking this up and also helping us, or at least I feel this way, helping me understand and process so much of what happened. I feel like it's taken me 13 years out of Scientology to be able to somewhat coherently explain what happened to me in Scientology over the 35 years, because a lot of it, like I was saying, you don't necessarily recognize it. Talk about not knowing it was a cult. I was at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles, your old workplace. And I was, I live in Minnesota. So I flew out there to do I might've been starting to get ready to get on the upper levels. And that was when the Heaven's Gate cult thing went down, where all those people unalived themselves. Remember that? Where they wore the tennis shoes, and it was in California somewhere. I think, I'm not positive. And they were all kind of dressed the same and wearing the tennis shoes, and they were found deceased, and this whole thing.
Are these the one
and
that
I remember
thought there was an asteroid flying by and they had to go meet it or something like that? Am I getting it
go
mixed
meet
up?
the spaceship or something? And so this was their plan, was to do this all together. And I remember thinking at the time the same thing, like, whoa, that is some crazy stuff. So for me, that was kind of like where I was like, oh, that's a cult. That's a cult, because they're planning on harming themselves in these ways. Meanwhile, I was like across the street at a cult and didn't know.
Yes. I don't want to digress too much, but since you mentioned this, I have to opine on this. People have asked whether, when they hear about like the international base in Gilman Hot Springs and how it's this weird, like enclosed, thing, like separate from the rest of society. The question comes up, could Scientology end like Heaven's Gate, or like, was it the People's Temple? Who was the,
I think it was Jim Jones.
Yes. And generally speaking, the answer is of course not. But I have thought of this scenario. If David Miscavige, for whatever reason, who knows, doesn't matter, came out and said, okay, I've received a message from L. Ron Hubbard. He needs some help on Target 2. We're doing pretty good here on Earth. Everyone 65 or above, you need to drop the body and go meet up with L. Ron Hubbard. Here's some instructions. A certain percentage of people would absolutely do that. The only reason, what do you think about that?
I think 100%. And I think it would be Sea Organization members, Sea Org members who are of that age, because they don't have family. So it would be easier to
Right.
do, I think, if you didn't have those connections and all you had in life. I mean, if it were me, I try to put myself in those shoes. I've been in the C organization. I got to get back to the cult mentality here. I've been in the C organization for years. I'm over 65. Would I do this? I would, in the hopes that Target 2 had better rooms to stay in, or
Yeah. I mean, if it
even
was
better
something simple
food.
like and of course, the reason why this scenario is not realistic is because I don't think any Scientologist or former Scientologist could come up with a realistic circumstance that would make David
Yeah,
Miscavige issue such an order. So that's why it's a total hypothetical. My answer is still no. That's not
yeah,
something that would happen in Scientology. But my point is this, though. If David Miscavige decided that there was a reason he wanted that to happen, it would happen. Um, uh, e- and that the people who joined the People's Temple never thought that that was going to end that way, and that was a possibility either. And I'm
yeah,
not trying to like stir fear, like, oh my God, this is what's going to happen. No, no, this is not going to
yeah. No,
happen. But
no.
the amount of mental and thought control that is exerted over the members of Scientology is equal to or greater than what existed in the People's Temple. And if Miscavige chose that he wanted that to happen, it would happen. It's not like the People's Temple was somehow a worse cult than Scientology. It's the
Yeah.
same stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty garden variety. And that's the thing I came to learn too after leaving Scientology and learning more about different high control groups and other cults is the similarities. And honestly, only more recently because of all these documentaries that come out about different cults. I've been watching them and fascinated by them because I watched that and I'm like, oh my gosh, we did something, that was similar. We just called it different things, but the way you control people, the mind control, the manipulation, the threats of losing your family, of being cut off from the only group that you've really known, especially if you grew up in it. Those are huge deterrents to leaving, even for other
Absolutely.
cults. That's what blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's like somebody wrote
So
a book on how to be a cult leader.
when you mentioned earlier the YouTube the ex Scientology message boards, not YouTube, I'm sorry. Where were those were those Yahoo message boards?
I don't recall that they were Yahoo message boards. Maybe someone in the chat knows. I remember you had to go online and you had to log into it. You would get a
Hmm.
username and a password. So it's kind of like it was a website. I don't think it wasn't like Facebook has groups you can join if you're really into Dalmatians. There's the Dalmatian group. It was very specific. ESMB was the ex Scientology or ex Scientologist message board. And everybody would use, not their real name, of course. So you had to come up with like a whole name to be able to use. Yeah, ESMB had its own server. Okay. But it was a huge part of me being able to leave Scientology because I wanted to leave multiple times. I probably spent most of my adult life at different times getting in trouble because I didn't really want to be there or just kind of phoning it in at times. I had my moments where I was a more dedicated Scientologist than others. I mean, I did some of the upper levels, but it wasn't until I knew I wanted to leave, I decided I had to leave. But in reading those things on the message boards, which to me today is what social media is, for me, it validated that I wasn't crazy. I hadn't lost my mind because, Aaron, there was a part of me, even for a little while after I left, not a long time, but a little while, where I had some anxiety over, like, oh my gosh, what if that was a mistake? What if L.
Mm.
Ron Hubbard was right? What if what they said about me was right? That, I really am a suppressive person in the ways that Scientology describes it, this evil person in being. What if that was true? And the more that I was able to expose myself to different people who'd walk the path that I walk and saw what I saw, because being in Scientology is like arriving on this other planet and nobody is acknowledging the fact that one, you're on another planet, and two, that there's all these very crazy things happening around you, or that you're seeing. Like if you walked in and saw a whole bunch of aliens and no one is saying anything about it and just treating it like, oh yeah, yeah, this is totally normal.
um, okay, so the reason I mentioned going back to the conversation about the message boards is you had said that what's different about the social media platform, YouTube, I guess Twitter, I guess TikTok,
Yeah.
and those other platforms is the ability for people who've never been involved in Scientology to join the conversation and to support the conversations as well. Do you think that extra component plays a role in social media bringing about the downfall of Scientology?
Absolutely. There aren't enough ex-Scientologists to carry this movement. If every Scientologist left Scientology, I mean, of course, that would probably solve the problem at that point. But let's just say, let's be generous and say 20,000 people left Scientology, right? Because think of
Yes.
how many are under the radar, and they're included in that number. All you got to do is bump into a Scientologist and they count you as a Scientologist. But you don't, if all those people left, it's still not enough. It's not, I don't think it would be enough people. But the thing that makes a big difference for me, Aaron, is it's not just the number of people never in Scientology who are now supporting our channels and helping us grow them and just being in the chat in the comments and being so supportive. They're sharing this message with other people. They're now sharing it and these stories and what happens. And that is a big turning point in the number of voices that are going to be able to get this message out, and enough people too saying, hey, no, that's not okay what happened to you. And it actually was very weird.
Yeah.
And it's there's more of a clear path, I think, out of it and away from it because of the people never in Scientology. And because they say,
Yes.
hey, this is not okay.
I think there's another factor as well, which is all of the support from, there's billions of people in the world who've never been in Scientology, but all the support from the hundreds and thousands or millions of the people who watch SPTV also gives people leaving Scientology the confidence to speak out, knowing there is support for that activity. That there's more
Yeah.
potential support out there to counteract the hate and the attacks and the gaslighting from Scientology. The support, that base of support, actually allows more people who leave to make the decision to not just leave, but to leave
Yeah.
and speak out a
Yeah.
lot and publicly and a lot and loudly. That's
Mhm.
the other benefit of that community, the community component.
Yeah. Think about even what just happened to you. How many people were already following along, right? Had been following the channel, getting educated on the abuses within Scientology, what they need to do, go bring up to Congress. Hey, how y'all feel about looking into Scientology and a hearing on their tax exempt status? Sharing that message. This has already been growing, but what happened was so shocking and caught on video, shared across social media, that it created even more people now who are interested, who want to learn about it, who want to educate, who want to find out, who want to make sure that they themselves are not in a cult. Because many of you out there might think you've never been in a cult. I hate to tell you. When we start talking sometimes and you relate and it resonates, think about what that controlling group or relationship was. There are commonalities there. But with that many voices, there's just so many. And like you said, there's such safety in numbers. Back in the day when there was the ex-Scientology message board, for one, you needed to be really under the radar, even as an ex-Scientologist, because they just came at you harder. That's not
Yeah,
something I'm worried about today. I'm really not.
right. It's the opposite. I almost hope I'm always hoping they're going to do something because it's an opportunity to show the entire world what they do.
Yeah. Well, dude, that's why
Guys,
you
we
just got
have
arrested.
yeah, that was that LAPD done messed up. But I'll tell you, I think what we're going to find
Completely.
as we move forward with the lawsuit and discovery and getting
Yeah.
phone records and emails and body cam footage, I think we're going to find that Scientology had a lot to do with how the LAPD handled that situation.
Oh,
I
completely.
yeah. By the way, we
Completely.
have
And
almost
how many more
3,000
people are
people
going to learn?
watching. Yeah, we have almost 3,000 people watching. If you're not yet subscribed to Natalie's channel, Scientology, Life After a Cult, please go and subscribe.
Mhm.
What else can we say about the social media aspect of this? What about, because we've just been talking about how social media allows all the people in the world who've never been in Scientology to support those who are former members speaking out. How about like almost the new breed of social media Scientology creators, like the TikTok Squirrel Squad, who
Yes.
hopefully will move more and more towards YouTube, because it seems like TikTok's a really easy place to get censored and deplatformed. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's phenomenal. And it's twofold for me. It's two things. When we talk about the young people on TikTok, I mean, everybody's on TikTok, but specifically like Jessica Palmadessa and Confident Chris and Chris Without a Hellcat. And it it's two things. It's that they're on these social media platforms. They're used to being in this environment of, being videoed and sharing about their lives and having conversation and building these online relationships. But a lot of it, I think, is also their age and their generation. They are, especially the, Gen Z, it's they just don't take a lot of crap, but at the same time, the level of understanding and compassion that I see blows my mind because so I'm Gen X. I like to say I'm Gen X with a few boomer tendencies. But I think about what I've learned from my girls, raising my kids. My daughters are in their early 30s, so they're millennials, younger millennials. But even the difference is there that I've learned from them about how, what they have. And plus my kids grew up even with the upbringing for a while that they had in Scientology, it's still, they were different. They're just different. And I think with these young people, that's the thing, is they were raised in a different way. And there's so much more openness. They're more open to things and different ideas. There's exception to every rule. I'm not saying every single person, but with that openness comes an understanding. I like when I was watching that time when you was in jail, when you were in jail over there in Hollywood, the I remember with Confident Chris and other ones, they were saying like, they're not leaving. They're not leaving till you get let out. And it was never a thing where it was like, hey, you guys need to stay here. We all need to stay till he can't leave. They very just went in there and calmly sat down and were like, okay, well, we're going to be here and we're going to be here until he gets out. It was just so supportive. The things that I hear on my channel with how people communicate, how they see Scientology through the eyes of someone who's not only never been in Scientology, but this younger generation who just has a different way of seeing the world that it's almost hard to put words to, but I like it. I think it's cool. Some stuff bugs the crap out of me, but I think that's just generational because I'm older and sometimes we might get stuck in our ways. But when I open my mind to it, and you tell me, Aaron, I feel in many ways, I left Scientology 13 years ago. And sometimes I feel like I've just been around on the planet in the world for 13 years. You know what I'm saying? It's because it's such a different world than what the world that we lived in.
Yeah,
What's that
it's
been like
true.
for you?
I guess I don't necessarily feel that I've only been in the world for 10 years. But I just feel like it's been a gradual process letting go of certain biases or fixed ways of thinking,
Yes.
and trying not to still have this idea of, oh, but what would the people who are still in Scientology think of this?
Yeah.
And somehow letting concern about what people who are still in Scientology would think of something dictate my own choices in life, and having to realize that if I still have attention on that, then I'm still to some extent being controlled by that group,
Yeah.
and just being able to throw that away, and still holding on to the ideas that you should be ashamed of certain things, because Scientology is so big on shame. So big on
Yes.
shame. It's funny. Scientology has this phrase, blame, shame, and regrets. It's a phrase. It's funny. I hardly ever even saw that phrase in anything L. Ron Hubbard wrote, but blame, shame, and regret is a thing in Scientology. And and it's supposed to be considered a very bad thing. And yet in Scientology, it's what they weaponize constantly.
Yeah.
And there's so much freedom to just throwing away these fixed ideas of things that you should feel blame, shame, and regret about. And it's just amazing how many of those things is Scientology instilled in us, while somehow
Yeah.
convincing us that we were the most emotionally free people in this sector of the Galactic Federation. But they're just so heavy on the blame, shame, and the regret. I mean, even me, like, staying in a marriage for so long that I knew was not something that was bringing either of us happiness. Very large portion of that was not wanting Scientology to feel like they had won. And eventually, like, somehow Scientology would do a victory lap if we got a divorce. And then going, why do I give a shit whether they would take a victory lap? Like, why are we not making decisions based on what would be best for us? Why am I hanging on to this thing of, oh, would Scientologists be happy if this happened? You know, like stuff like that.
Yeah, just letting it go. Some of that I think comes with not just leaving Scientology and getting further away from it and learning other tools, because I feel like we were raised a certain way, and you're raised with these tools and the ways of seeing the world. It's like we're these blank computers, and we get given these programs to operate on, right? So the programs get downloaded and we operate on those programs, and that's how we grow up, and that's how we were in the Sea organization, and that's how we did things using those programs. Then you leave Scientology and you delete all the programs. And if you don't have some other tool, or at least a willingness to learn and consider some different way of doing things, I think that's where you can fall on your face and go down a very painful rabbit hole. And so whether for people that's therapy, whether it's exercise, whether it's yoga, whatever that is, where you learn, reading different books. I know that's something I have loved doing since I left Scientology, is learning about so many different things. I mean, so many. I decided, and again, this took me took me that first 10 years, I think, was when I really got through probably most of the brainwashing. Once in a while, I'm like, ooh, my cult is showing. But then I can recognize it, and then that helps, and I can get beyond it. But having those tools, and when I decided that, what if I don't need to, everything's not black and white. I don't need to make certain choices. I don't need to choose between two things. There might be 3, 4, or 5 if I want to see them. And I think that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, letting go of the idea that there's only this option or that option. There's stay in the cult, there's leave the cult. There's like this person, there's not like that person. No, there's not. And if for some people it is that way, then that's fine. Because what I've tried to adopt, and what I try to do with myself and with other people, and sometimes it takes work, I got to remind myself, is that it doesn't matter. I still get to be me and show up as me, no matter what anyone else does or thinks. That's okay. It doesn't actually have to affect me, because that's just where they're over there. I'm over here. And being okay with it. But a lot of that, I think, Aaron, is age too. I'm in my early 50s and going through life, leaving the cult, but also age. I've heard that from a lot of my friends not in Scientology too, that we get to that point where we realize, I don't have to impress anybody. If I want to go to the grocery store in my pajamas, why not? I'm just so much more like the why not? Well, how could that be? Why couldn't it be that way? Why does there have to be that initial judgment? What if it was possible? What if everything was possible? And you know what I found out? That when I have that state of mind of what if, no matter what somebody told me, it was possible, that's when I actually listen. That's when I'm actually like, I can push aside my own bias, because I have my own bias about a lot of things. Like, don't you dare talk crap to me about spam. Hormel spam. I'm from Hawaii. We love it. It is one of the foods of my people. I will not stand for it. You just take that negativity home. But outside of that, I'm like, okay, tell me, what do you think about this kind of a thing?
That's awesome.
What do you think? Did you find that
let's
easier?
tackle which part easier though?
For when you left, when you talk about all of that judgment, right? it feels like with yourself, you've been able to kind of like let go of the blame and the shame and the regret. Did
Only
you notice
recently.
a difference? Yeah, see. Yeah. I
Oh yeah.
think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
takes some
yeah.
time.
But yeah, and when I say only recently, I mean like the last few months. So very
That's a good
recently.
thing.
Quick reminder, you guys can find Natalie's channel at Scientology Life After a Cult. And we mentioned a moment ago how TikTok seems to be a platform where it's easy to get canceled. I mentioned that because just today,
Yeah.
2 TikTok accounts were permanently banned. And one of those, so I'm recommending that you guys go over and check out their YouTube channels. Scientology Audit YouTube channel, you should check out. His TikTok account was banned today. And Jessica Palmadessa, please go check out her YouTube channel. Her TikTok was banned today. I think there's still a chance they could get those channels restored, but who knows? YouTube's where it's at anyway. But if you're about that TikTok life, those TikTok accounts are important. It takes a long time to grow an account. And Jessica had over 1.1 million followers on TikTok, so that's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's tackle some of these super chats here. Blues Minor Swing, Streets LA confronting public officials. Streets LA went to his local council meeting yesterday and brought up the arrest, and LA Audit also called in and brought up the arrest. And that video, that live stream from last night is on the Scientology Audit YouTube channel. You guys can find that. The same comment. Thank you very much. Vintage Mama of 3, TikTok banned Jess and William. Yep, indeed. Kenda Links. I feel a member of this family, coming from being the gay in evangelical churches and family, always being shamed. Yeah, that's a similar thing in Scientology. They very much look down on any LGBTQ stuff. And I think anyone coming out of Scientology has to like do like a viewpoint shift on that subject.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Bernadette Lonefire. Nerd Report sent a raid here. They banned Jess and Streets on TikTok. I kept seeing people referring to Nerd Report in the live stream, but I couldn't find the Nerd Report account here. So, but hello, welcome, raiders. Glad to have you here. Tell Perion, if we can have Grandpa Dad, there's no reason we can't have wedding funeral.
Exactly. I always say, come for the Grandpa Dad stories, then stay for the Scientology abuse education around the campfire. But it's all part of it.
You definitely need some Grandpa Dad merch. That's my favorite.
Yeah,
thing.
that's actually not a bad idea.
Kendallings, SPTV provides a safe space for all. Yes,
Agreed.
indeed. Except for liars and grifters. None of those are welcome here. Rural SD lawyer, Aaron is always my favorite, but Natalie, you're a strong second. And I love that we are practically neighbors, Minnesota and South Dakota.
I love
Yes.
South Dakota, and I'll take it. I'll take that.
I actually need to figure out how to have someone in my back office with me and starring the non-super chat comments, because the super chat comments automatically get starred. You don't have to go look for them. And it would actually help me out a lot. I've got to figure that out. Do you have anybody helping you with comments in the back office?
I do. I got a couple of great moderators, plus my Tony has been moderating, and I need to figure out the same thing. So I was going to Google it later. I think it's something to do with an admin setting. You have to make them an admin or something to be able to star it. It doesn't, but I don't know. I got to figure it out. I was going to ask you actually.
Yeah, you'd think I'd have it figured out by now. All right, guys. Well, I'll tell you what, I got to get ready for the downtown Clearwater live stream at Flag this evening.
I'm going to be watching.
We're going to wrap this up. But one last reminder, if you're not yet subscribed to Natalie on YouTube, find her at Scientology Life After a Cult. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening. Thanks to everyone who watches until the very end. We'll see you later.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.